Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Babbling Irons channel. Today, we're going to be talking about 5 youth players that are out there in pre-season at the moment and who could potentially get into our first 11 next season, especially with the Conference League. Joined with Mike and Sloth today, so the famous three are back. Good to have you, lads. And one player we want to kind of start with is Conor Coventry, who's been, had a really good season away on loan at MK Dons, and, their fans have been full of praise for him. And with Mark Noble, we know he's going to be around no longer next season, and also obviously Alex Crowell being out of the picture. Instead of having that pressure on kind of signing a central midfielder, do we actually have the option of bringing Conor Coventry in and giving him the chance this season in terms of not being a starter, but being that squad player that we kind of need?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I think, if we're looking for a Crowell replacement, I think he can do that job. Just needs to play 4 minutes in the season. So I think that'll be fine. But seriously, I think, the way he played in the League One, many people, and I know this is always the really, really contentious thing, is that people will say they're not ready. My argument is until you see him in the competition that you are talking about, you cannot state a player is ready. The whole point is that unconscious bias. So if you're looking at a player going, well, he's only played League One, so he's not going to be up to the standard, you're using it as a bias you've set, and you're using that as a basis for an argument. Ultimately, I can't say I can't do a job until I've actually tried it in some respects. I can say I can't do it, but ultimately, if I put my mind to it, it is something you could probably do, right? With the right aptitude and training, all of that stuff. So he done really well last year. He's shown his attitude towards West Ham and his attitude to wanting to be a player for us by rejecting the chance to go and have an extended break. And no, he wants to come, wants to be part of the club, wants to be part of the training. He's obviously gone there. I think that's a testament to the kid that he really wants to do it. And even saying kid, I think that's a bit derogatory. He's 22 years old. He's a young man. So, he's clearly showing that he wants to try and make something of it. I think the good news is he's going to get pre-season to show himself. And I think arguably probably one of the good things for him is the fact that we have so many positions to cover. We don't necessarily want, whilst we're going to have wide change, we maybe don't want to have too much. So providing he does well in pre-season, I think he's got a chance. I think the other thing for him as well, why he probably really wants to make an impression, is he only has 1 year left on his current deal. So it is truly make or break, really, this pre-season for him. And we also do have that qualification game coming up in Europa Conference League. So there is ample opportunity for him to demonstrate his qualities. I hope he would. It's always nice to see a young lad come through. Obviously, it helps us with the homegrown quota. Also gives us that youth player as well for the quota we need for Europa Conference. So I'm hopeful. He does seem to have a bit about him as a player. Seems quite like Noble, but with probably a bit more pace. Same kind of engine, but he's demonstrated he's up for a battle. There are still rough spots, but he's still young. He's still young, and he's only really had 1 season. So I like to think he's going to get a chance. I think, again, it really hinges on pre-season for him. I think this time, now being 22 and a year left.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one because as a club, we are trying to progress and we want to make these kind of big name signings, and not even big name signings, but smart signings from, the top European leagues. And well, actually, you can kind of counter that and actually look at what you've got already in terms of assets. And Conor Coventry, like you mentioned, hasn't really had that chance to prove himself on the level that he needs to. And maybe this season is his opportunity with Noble going and Crowell going as well. We are definitely light in that position. And even signing a centre midfielder, we would still need another one. We would still need a Coventry-like player. So, Sloth, how would you kind of see him slotting into that West Ham team, in terms of how he kind of plays and who you would want to see him partner in that midfield? Would it be Rice? Would it be Souček? Who would you go with?
That would actually be my kind of key point with Coventry, is we would need to bring in 2 more players as well. And I think the key thing with Coventry would be he's that rotational player. You know, this is let's face it, his chance to prove himself. Final year, going forward, you kind of need to look at the system that we play. And we mentioned with Warburton coming in, could that potentially change a little bit? It could change with the window. We don't know. But if we're looking to play with kind of maybe him as more of a floating player in that middle, less defensive responsibility, then I would probably put Souček next to him just to have that anchor. He's got that similar sort of engine, but he's a bit more defensive minded. And Coventry's got a fantastic passing range. So I think if we could get players like Souček on the end of that, then he's a real asset. But for me, it's kind of, he's going to be that player to look at and be the rotation. He's going to be the option for who we bring in. And whether that means we still look at signing someone like Onana and a Brownhill or whoever it might be, then fantastic. But Coventry's got to prove himself. It's not a case of we should bring him in because he's an academy lad. It's a case of we're looking to progress. Our academy needs to progress with that. And if the players are of quality, then they'll prove themselves. I think he's shown a lot this season. I don't really like when people say, oh, it's only League One. And I can be guilty of that at times, where you kind of look at it and you go, it's a lower level. But then you look at the likes of Dele Alli, who just made that step up instantly. And yeah, that's not gone very well. But if we're just talking about making the step up, then players are capable of that. So I think the key for him next season is he's going to have to be comfortable with being rotation. And I would look to make him a bit more of a natural centre mid as opposed to a central defensive midfielder or that anchor player.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because this pre-season, I think we start at Ipswich and Boreham Wood, so it'll be in one of those 2 squads. And you know, you look at the squad at the moment, Rice and Souček aren't going to be there, so he's going to be playing, and we don't know who he's going to be playing with. It will probably be like a Lanzini or someone like that with a bit more experience next to him. So I think it'll be interesting to see what Moyes wants from him in terms of his role in the team, and what kind of limitations he will put on his game, like we saw with Rice when he was first playing as a defensive midfielder, but he's only, recently started to explore a bit more of his attacking side. Or whether Moyes will kind of say, do your thing, be a bit more expansive with your passing. Like you mentioned, Slothy's got a fantastic pass on him, and kind of allow him to show his qualities off before the likes of Rice and Souček come into the preseason fold, and or, if we make a couple signings in that position. So I think the most important part is he wants to play for West Ham. I think that's quite apparent. Like you mentioned, Mike, as well, he's turned down an extended break to be there training, which shows how dedicated he is. And if you're going to spend 20 million on a Brownhill, is there the case of the argument, you look at a Coventry, you look at someone like that in your academy that maybe could just do just as good as a job, if not better job than a 20 million pound Brownhill would cost you?
I would personally, the option is Brownhill or Coventry. I choose Coventry 10 times out of 10. It's as simple as that. I don't see what bringing in Brownhill for 20 million pounds is going to do for us, other than he's going to be a rotational player that is a known quantity in the league. He's not going to increase in value. In fact, it's most likely going to go downwards. Coventry, at least if he plays for a season, if he does well, then and we extend his contract, that's the other important thing. We're going to have to extend the contract if we want him to at least to be a sellable asset in seasons to come if he does stay. Then let's take our mind back to like Ashley Fletcher wasn't a good player, but he had at least a solid season and someone was willing to take a chance. We sold him for £7.5 million. We got more money than we ever should have for him, but we gave him a chance. And this is the problem that I always have when people say they're not ready. Players often aren't ready. But if you at least give them minutes, they can get seen. And by being seen, that then maybe gives someone's going to go take a chance on him. And if you can actually weight that with, say, 10 performances in the Premier League where they've done this to a good standard, Championship club is going to have a look and at least want to, rather than paying maybe a couple of £100,000, they're actually going to want to pay a couple million for them. So all of a sudden, when you think the academy costs us about £4 to £5 million, I think, a year, one player is then also paid for half a year worth of the academy. That can also be used then to not only just pay for half a year at academy, but that maybe releases funds to go and get a better standard of academy player to bring in to then look to promote. You know, we constantly talk about we're the academy of football. When was the last time, bar Rice, that one of them's come through? You know, and on top of that is you need to be bringing through at least one or two academy players, in my opinion, each year, because you need to be looking at them to fund the next wave of player. Sorry, Ben Johnson. I forgot Ben Johnson. Sorry.
Well,
yeah.
A really good point. I think one of the best kind of examples of that is Grady Diangana recently. You know, I think we all thought, oh, that looks like he looks like an exciting player, a prospect who can push the squad. Sold him, and there was an outcry, and you know, it just hasn't worked for him at West Brom, and the reason we got that money for him is because he was given minutes in the Premier League. We're talking about replacements, and one of the things that I would look to kind of really emphasize is we don't want a replacement, we want an upgrade, or we want competition. And you know, Coventry is a great example of he can force his way in, but we need competition and potential upgrades. Now, do I think someone like Brownhill is an upgrade in any way to Noble? He's younger, and he's probably a bit more mobile and technically maybe the same, maybe a little bit better. But is he, you know, competition for Souček? In my opinion, he's not even remotely close. Like, you know, we're talking about a guy who's played European football and has scored in European football games. Competition, when you're looking at that, for me, you're looking at someone who's either had an outstanding season, is very young, and potentially you think he could do that in the future, or you're sat back and thinking, well, actually, that's a really good bargain, and he at least is that level. For me, Brownhill isn't any of those things. And Coventry can do that job of providing a bit of competition or rotation whilst being, let's face it, an unknown quantity at this level. I think you're much better off looking elsewhere for that depth. But the case of kind of having this academy produce players, giving the minutes is key. And when we've got so many competitions we're competing in, we need to rotate the squad more. And it's all well and good having a small squad. You know, I kind of threw my toys out the pram at the end of the season because we had such a small squad with so little rotation, and you could tell it was really beginning to get to players. But
Antonio was asking for competition and to be not necessarily dropped, but rotated. But it didn't happen. You know, when you've got your own players in a diplomatic way asking to be rested and asking to have competition to drive them on, I think that speaks volumes, doesn't it, really? As to the small squad is great because of the camaraderie and everything, but also player welfare is maybe not at the forefront of a small squad.
I think when we're looking at players like Oko-Flex as well, you know, I mentioned earlier in the season that pace off the bench is killer for sides. You look at what Johan Visser did to us. You know, he was low cost. I think he cost them something like £8 million.
Might be 11, but yeah, it
Yeah.
was inexpensive, really, in the grand scheme of things.
But he's effectively paid for himself in terms of league positions and finish. And if we're talking about the academy, then what we need to be looking at is those players when we brought through that crop of youngsters and they played against in the Europa League.
Dinamo,
Dinamo Zagreb. I always get Dinamo Moscow, Dinamo Zagreb.
Yeah, it was Zagreb. Yeah,
yeah. Me started to question it as well.
But when they played, that's when we needed to think, right, it's not just a chance for them to prove themselves and put a name for competition. It's a chance to put them in the shop window. And as cynical as that sounds, unfortunately, that's the reality of the game. And, you know, we named a number of players at the start. If any one of them can go for £5 million, if Oko-Flex, you know, came on, scored a couple of winners or looked good, and is instantly worth £8 or £10 million, then that pays for the academy, and that pays. It pays for these youngsters, and it pays for us as a football club to add a bit more premium. You know, get the extra million for players, get that extra, you know, bit of renown for the academy.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like, well, it's a good little segment onto the next one, because it looks like Issa Diop's going to be leaving the club. We don't know how much for, but it looks like he's going to be going to Lyon. And we have brought in Agerd, so we've got 4 centre-backs in Zuma, Agerd, Dawson and Ogbonna. However, the 2 latter that I just mentioned only have 1 more year on their deal. They're both aging, I think 32 and 33 years old. So is it a chance for a player like Aji Alessi, for example, who's, you know, only 21 and has been looking like a really, really good player for our under-23s team? And, you know, he was one that played in that Zagreb game as well, and I thought stood out as one of the better players on the pitch in comparison to, you know, if you look at all of the youth team players that were playing. I think that kind of player can be exactly what we need to bring through the academy and into that first team next season, especially with Conference League, because I think there's a lot less pressure on us being in the Conference League in comparison to the Europa League. And it's a great chance for these kind of players to get some minutes, not just in Europe, but also like Carabao Cup, FA Cup, because there's going to be a lot of football. We have that World Cup break as well, which could affect certain positions and certain players that are in our first team. So we're going to need the players like this. And if we are selling Diop, we only have 4 centre-backs, and you might think, well, we've got cover, but it only takes 1 injury, you know. And if one of Zuma or Agard gets injured, we're kind of back to square one with having to play a Dawson, and we don't know how good Ogbonna's going to be after this injury. So do we now have a kind of potential to bring in Alessi and not look elsewhere on the market after Diop goes? And again, it's that thing of not having to spend money when you've got a potential asset in your ranks in the youth system as well.
I think one of the key things for me here is, if you look at top teams, if you look at teams who want to compete for Europe and want to compete for trophies, they all have that squad depth. And it's not a case of, you know, he could provide competition. It's a case of he needs to compete with what we have. And if he's not at that level of, say, Ogbonna or Dawson, then it's a question of, why isn't he quite there? Why hasn't he been loaned out? Why didn't he get a chance after that European game to come through a little bit more? And why is it that if Diop goes, we haven't got someone lined up? We haven't got an idea in mind, because, as we said, you know, it only takes a couple of injuries. And if Ogbonna doesn't look the same player that he was, then that's almost a write-off. It's a huge amount of pressure to put on players with this small squad, and then go, okay, well, we have got a youth player. That's great. It's a great boost of confidence for the youth player, but having that pressure is totally unnecessary. For you to say, oh, Ogbon is injured, he's out for the rest of the season, you're going to get a shot, is not just oh, this is exciting. It's a lot of pressure. And if you're going into a cauldron atmosphere, if you're in a European game and you mess up, your head's going to drop. You're like, it's going to take a lot of minerals to really push through that. So again, I think we need to be looking at signings. We need to be looking at bringing someone in, giving these players the time to play on the pitch, to rotate in and push forward from there. You know, I mentioned squads competing, teams competing for top spots. Like, even look at Arsenal's problem at the moment. Arsenal have got Saliba, who's, in my opinion, he's one of the top young centre-backs in the world. Yet they've got Ben White in that position, and people are going, well, Ben White can play there. They've got Gabriel there. Now, for me, those players don't come close, but they're already Premier League proven as such. I know we don't like that term, but they're Premier League proven, and they've got games under their belts. They've got minutes at this level where they know they can play. They've got Tomiyasu, and they're not looking and thinking, well, we've got quite a big squad. Maybe we should move one on. It's always replacements, and it's always looking at how to improve. That's, for me, what needs to change. But if we've got Elise and he looked great in Europe, give him a chance, bring him in, but add to competition, keep adding. Don't just sit back on your laurels.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing for me is David Moyes very much hesitant to bring in that kind of player, especially in a position like centre-back where they're going to be under a lot of scrutiny. You know, we saw it with Reece Oxford so many years ago when he had that really good game at Arsenal, and then he kind of just fizzled off after that, and that was kind of the last we saw of him. But since then, he's kind of revived his career elsewhere in the German league, and you know, there's even rumours that we're linked back with him again. So I think having a manager like David Moyes, who doesn't particularly, not only just youth, but even our rotational players, he didn't trust. You know, the likes of Vlasic, Yarmolenko, he wasn't particularly trustworthy of those players, even Ben Rama. So to then go one step further and look at an Alese or a Coventry, for example, I think that's where Moyes can sometimes come a bit unstuck with the fan base, because he doesn't particularly like changing things. And we saw that as well in last season in the FA Cup against Southampton. We played a pretty much full strength team when we needed to rotate, and we had the option to rotate. So, Mike, I guess it's a question for you here. Do you think Alese has that chance to be that Diop replacement in terms of not just his quality at the moment, but also in terms of Moyes actually giving him that opportunity in the first place?
So I think I just want to touch on something that Sloth said earlier, that putting these players in the shop window is a big thing. So we put players in the shop window. They actually gathered interest. And in January, we had offers for those players to go on loan. We rejected that to keep them because of our squad was so thin, and then didn't play them. So what frustrates me is that, do I think Alese could be someone that could be a player for us in the future? I do. The problem I have, or the problem that I see, is he's never going to have enough experience, and he has 2 years left on his contract. So he has 1 year now plus an extension. And it's the same problem we have with Coventry, in that this summer for Coventry is so important, and it kind of takes many comparisons to Josh Cullen, in that 22 years old, last year of his contract. Do we give him a chance in which to earn a new deal and then renew halfway through the season? Or do we take it up to 6 months and then sell him for a nominal fee? Or do we just sell now? That's where I feel Coventry is. And I think we may just go down the route of, well, let's just sell him now, where his value is arguably going to be at its highest. With Alese, he did well. He had offers. He didn't go. He wasn't allowed to leave because we wanted him for squad depth. We then didn't use him. So my issue is, if we keep him around, he has to play. He's 21 years old. If you do not play him now, you are harming his development as a player. And quite frankly, as a football club, our first concern to any of our youth players, and as much as they're hated as a football club, which is the Red Bulls, they are so good with their players. They are so concerned with that player's development that they will do what they can for not only for their clubs, because they know they need to benefit financially, but they always work with the players' interests at heart and their development at heart. Even when players have left, they're still checked in to see how they're developing, how they're getting on. We have to have that mentality. We've heard the Red Bull model. That's part of the Red Bull model. This thing of where a player's development is at the heart of your club. Now, if we are the Academy of Football, we need to be looking at how do we best develop these players. Keeping them around to sit and watch from the bench, it's going to give them some level of experience, but it's not going to develop them. It's going to maybe develop them mentally. It's not going to develop them technically, physically, and so on. Under-23 league isn't good enough. They've also dropped it now to, I think, under-21. So he will be eligible this year, but next year, obviously, no. So the question is, if we're keeping him around, he has to play because he needs to develop. He needs that chance to develop. But if he's only going to play 4 or 5 games, again, that's not a development for him. He needs to be playing at least 10 games in a season. At least 900 minutes has to really be the minimum for a player to really see what they're like. So I guess really the thing is sending him on loan to get experience, because he's not going to get experience as he is now. Moyes, bar what John Stones, I can't think of a player or a centre-back he's had who's been less than 24 as a defender, unless they've got a vast level of experience or even were there before he joined. So I don't see him looking to Elise as his option, because he will first look at, I've got Cresswell who can play left centre-back, and he did that. He booted that. He'll change the formation to accommodate not to play, whereas he could have used Alessi in that formation, kept Cresswell at left wing back. Again, not amazing kind of idea, but you would have had an experienced player next to him in central defence. You'd have had an experienced player on the left of him who could have guided him through a game. We rejected that opportunity. Regardless of what anyone says, we rejected that as an option in games. And instead, we left him on the bench to play players in makeshift positions. So essentially, we harmed his development for 6 months when he had interest and could have gone on loan potentially. We essentially harmed his development out of a selfish need of, we have a small squad, we need a player for the bench.
Yeah.
That, in my opinion, is not right. Many people won't agree with it because many people go, well, he wasn't ready. He didn't play. You can't say he's not ready and that's the other argument. He didn't play, therefore he's not ready. Again, there is no basis to that argument. It is just a throwaway comment in which to, in effect, to try and win an argument as to why the player's not played. Also, we don't see training, but again, we don't see the training. But if the player's good enough to be on the bench, and Moyes has even said, I'm not going to put a player on the bench unless I think they can do something on the pitch. So again, if they're on the bench, why they're not playing? You don't trust them, don't pick them.
It's interesting because, like you mentioned, no, it's really good because Alessi, like you mentioned, he's at that stage of his career now where he needs to be playing, and playing in the under-23s or under-21s, it's just no good for him. He might as well go out on loan to League One or League Two or even the Championship, because there's a player in there. We saw it in one Europa League game that there is a player in there. And like you mentioned, you need a kind of 9 or 10 games to really judge whether the player's ready. And another player that kind of was there or thereabouts was Harrison Ashby. We saw him not only in the Europa League, but we also saw him away at Spurs in the Carabao Cup when we played a back 5. I think that was more due to the fact that we had a lot of injuries and a lot of strain on our squad at that time. And Moyes kind of stuck him in there. But it's another name that I've always really liked. Ashby, when he's played, he's a lot more forward thinking. He's that kind of new generation fullback where they like to get forwards and they like to overlap and they like to be more offensive in their play. At the moment, we have Ben Johnson, who's just come through in the past 3-4 years in that fullback position. We also have Kufal there, and we also have Cresswell on the other side, and probably not Masuaku. So I guess we kind of have the option of signing a left back or a right back, which it looks like Moyes wants to do, especially at left back. But it kind of leaves Ashby in a sticky situation because I think he is one player that could potentially develop at the club. If Ben Johnson wasn't there, he would definitely be, for me, in that Ben Johnson position behind Kufau or contesting him for that, so to speak. And then you're kind of looking at the left back option, and we definitely need to sign and improve on that because Ben Johnson has played left back and we've seen he can play left back. And arguably, he's been better at left back than right back, in my opinion. So I think, yeah, in terms of Ashby keeping on topic, it's difficult for him because I can't see how he breaks through in the current crop of players we have and the way we are developing in terms of keeping Ben Johnson on that right-hand side, keeping Cresswell at the club, and also looking to sign another left back. And, Kufau's 29 now, so he'll probably still be sticking around for a couple more seasons if he brings back his performances. So it's unlikely Moyes will want to bring Ashby through or, give him the chance to break through. So I guess it's hard for him because I think he's got the talent, but it's whether Moyes is going to allow him the opportunity or whether he's going to get that opportunity in a West Ham shirt. And I think ultimately he won't have that. He might have a good pre-season. He might prove me wrong, but I think he will go to another club and develop really well. And it will be another one that we kind of miss out on. But I don't know. What's your guys' thoughts? Do you think he should stick around? Do you think Moyes will give him that chance?
So I think when we talk about youth, I think the one thing we should say, obviously, we've been quite damning on players getting opportunities. I think one thing we should actually state is that not many that we have let go have actually gone on to produce much. So let's be honest, our academy hasn't been where it should be for a number of years. We've only really produced Dean Garner, who's gone for a sticky patch last year. Oxford went through quite a sticky patch before he's had a bit of a resurgence. And obviously we've got Rice as well as Ben Johnson. So in about 11 years of the Gold, Sullivan and Brady era, we've only really produced 4 players. So in all that time, so you could argue our youth's not been good enough. And it's been warranted when they've gone out on loan. But then you look at, the new crop, there seems to be a lot more talent. Harrison Ashby's never looked out of place in all the games that he has played. I think what scuppered him is he got an injury season before last. That kind of scuppered his progression. There's another one we've talked about. We want to keep him around the squad. Now, he's 20. Keeping him around the squad actually isn't really going to aid his development. He should either be on loan or he should be playing in one form or another. I think the reason why we've talked about keeping him around the squad is the idea that if we go to a 3 at the back, they're probably thinking that they can move Johnson to a right centre-back. And then they got Ashby as a wing-back option because he has that mentality to do that. So it kind of makes me feel that they're thinking about Ashby because if they change formation, then if Johnson, they can move into right centre-back. And then they've got Ashby they can use as a wing-back alternative. Rightly or wrongly, that it's maybe a good idea. But again, as I said with Alessi, it's you're almost harming their development by holding them back for something that you may play them in 3 or 4 games. 3 or 4 games isn't really going to bring him on. Send him out on loan, get him, hopefully to the Championship. Maybe even see someone like Derby, because Derby have got so many issues. Maybe link with them. Let's face it, we're going to have some very strong connections with Birmingham going forward, quite frankly. Why not see about them taking some of our young players to give them minutes? QPR love to play loads of youth players. Go out to these clubs in the Championship. Get something in the contract that says if a player doesn't play, your loan gets more expensive. You play them, then you have this nominal amount. Don't worry about the wages side. We should cover that. We're a Premier League club. Why shouldn't we be able to cover their wages? But there should be obviously a fee attached to the player going on loan, but you incentivise the team. You play them, you pay less. If you don't pay them, then you're going to pay us. It's things like that, because then it encourages a team to play because it's that financial burden. It's like, well, if I don't play him, I'm not going to get any money. And I'm going to have to pay more money, so I'm going to lose more of my budget. So, that incentive works. And the likes of Liverpool put essentially clauses in that penalise teams if their player doesn't play. It's just how you should do it. Ashby needs to be playing to develop so we can actually turn around and say, well, do we need another right back? Could we just look at Soufal and go, well, in 2 years' time, maybe we move him on. Johnson, and hopefully in 2 years' time, has still progressed. So again, he can be the number one, or him and Ashby are then fighting out on even keel because Ashby's maybe played 1 to 2 seasons in the Championship because we sent him on loan for 2 years whilst Soufal is still number one and Johnson's there. You know, I just don't think sometimes we're thinking about 2 or 3 steps ahead when it comes to the youth players. We're looking at them now, and we haven't been great in getting loan deals. I think we can all say that the loan deals have tended to be pretty poor. And when you've got talent, you need to play them. And maybe the other argument is the reason also the thing about Ashby staying is because we're struggling to find a right wing option. And the thought is maybe he plays in advanced. Maybe he plays in a right wing position because he does have the ability to get forward. He is good on the ball. Maybe the view is that maybe we move him further forward and make him an understudy to Bowen. But I would question my own idea on that because we have the likes of Chester's coming through. There's Nevers coming through. There's even Oko-Flex could play in that role. So to your point of where does he find a spot? At the moment, his spot is at right wing back or right back. One of those formations we don't particularly play at the moment. The other one, he has 2 players ahead of him. So if we do keep him, then we're arguably stopping his development. So from a young kid's perspective, or the kid's perspective, and with most of these youth, you can understand why the likes of, say, Sonny Perkins is looking to, leave, because where is the pathway to get into the team? And it doesn't necessarily seem that pathway. We're not necessarily then putting them out on loan in which to gain experience to earn their right into the team. So you can understand why, like Sonny Perkins is potentially doing what he's doing, because he may sign in the next 2 days. We don't know. But you can understand why the likes of, say, Ashby would think, well, I need to be playing. I want to play. I want to test myself. And just to be kept around doesn't seem right. Obviously, it's a big pre-season again for him, but he already has 2 players ahead of him and 2 players that are probably quite comfortably ahead of him at this point. So I feel for the kid because I really think he really has something in him. But you need the opportunities to prove that. It's all very well saying you can think you can see a potential in a player, but you need to see them play.
One of my biggest kind of concerns with Ashby is that we played Soufal, who we knew was injured, over sticking with Johnson as a first choice right back while we operate on Soufal, let him recover, and have Ashby as that second. And for me, if you're a youth player and you know your competition, the first choice player is injured, is playing with an injury, is playing through it, and let's face it, his part of the reason we keep seeing people go, I'd look to move him on, is because he was very poor at the start of the season. Now, he's a fantastic player. First season proves that, undoubtedly, in my mind. And people are ignoring the fact he was playing through, I think it was a double hernia.
Yeah.
That is
injury. It wasn't a nice one.
A serious injury to play through. And all we would have had to do at the start of the season is say, right, deal with this. We've got Johnson. He's going to be our right back choice, first choice. Ashby is going to get that experience. He's going to be the second choice. He's going to have that responsibility and probably a few minutes here and there.
Also, you also got the thing of Craig Dawson played right back for how many years at West Brom? So there was never actually a shortage. We had players who can play that role. We chose to ignore.
And that's my big worry, is that Ashby, I've liked him when he's played. And as you say, he can do that modern fullback side as well as, looking quite competent as a right back. But when your managerial decisions are, I'm going to play an injured player over you to step up and be that second choice, that worries me. We don't need to go on about how bad our loan system is, because it's been proven time and time again. Now, whether we just need a complete and utter rehaul, or personally, I think we're focused on the fees that we get for loans. as opposed to just simply saying, if you don't play our player, like say he misses a game and you put £1,000 fine in that. Now, for a Premier League club, that's completely meaningless. But if you're paying that for a League One club, that's not a small sum of money. It's enough to not take the piss for, you know, the fines that they'll face. But if you're saying to a Championship club, £5,000 every time he doesn't play, eventually that's going to add up. And if they're not giving him minutes, if they're not giving him that time off the bench where they think, okay, 70 minutes, we've got, you know, it's 2-1, I'm going to give the kid off the bench a chance, and that's therefore as well not going to hit that clause. It's going to mean that we don't have to pay £5,000. I'll play him, give him those minutes. But I think we have this idea at the club where it's very much instantaneous. It's a short-term mindset, as opposed to let's put in a fine when they don't play. And, you know, Chelsea did that to us with Tomori. They said, you know, this player, if you don't play him, you're going to get fined. You're going to have to pay a little bit more for the loan. And Moyes basically said, well, I can't guarantee that. So it's, if they're the teams that we want to be up with, I'm not saying we can compete with Chelsea, but if we want to be in the European football shout where they are, then we have to be doing similar things. We have to be doing things of that standard. And I just don't see it at the moment. And
this comes back to our RB model, doesn't it? The Red Bull model. You have teams that you have alliances with and allegiances with. So you have that open conversation as to what positions do you need. Okay, well, we have this player. You take this player and you play him. It's a bit of a symbiotic relationship. They're getting a player for basically going to get it almost nothing. You're getting your player developed. And then, you know, it's that mutually beneficial relationship. And I think that's something we don't explore.
For me, it's not even about an RB model. It's not even about that kind of that ethos of as a club. It's just about poor business. It's really poor business. If you've got all these assets and you're not using them in any way, shape or form, it's like having a nice car. And if you don't give it the miles, if you don't work it, then it will develop problems.
Yeah.
And with these footballers, if we're not giving them minutes, if we're not loaning them out and developing them to the best they can be, we're going to see the impact on us. We're going to see that in the resale value. We're going to see that in the quality of the club, because as we saw with Diangane, he came in and he did well for us. He won us points and he pushed us, but we knew the right time to sell. And we just don't seem to be able to have that mindset with the youth products, with the youth setup. Make them sound like little toys or whatever, but I don't mean it in any disrespect. But we need to have a mindset where we look at players and think, what's best for your development is ultimately best for the club. And I think at the moment we have a mindset where it's, what can we get for you? And for me, that's completely wrong. It needs to change for us to be profitable, because it's all well and good people saying the academy's got lots of talent coming through, but if that talent isn't profitable, then at the end of the day, unless you're winning titles, unless you're competing high up in the league, it's meaningless.
Yeah. And you look at a team that finished second, third in the under-23 leagues last season. How many minutes they get in the Premier League? Sonny Perkins got about 5, maybe 10 minutes at the most. I think Dan Chester's got about 3 minutes. It's we need to get them in a shop window in some ways to at least get them out on loan, because then you even have that point of they do well on loan. That loan club maybe wants to buy them, or you get another club that comes in and wants to buy them. Yes, we do have to look at what can I get for you, but ultimately it needs to first be, your development is what's best for the club. And if you develop, we also get as a result, we get a good result out of it. We used to play youth back in the day. When we go back to Harry Redknapp days, obviously there was less pressure, but there's also less money, because with less money becomes a need to find solutions. Those solutions were you develop talent, you bring it through, you sell it on, you get it. Now there's an influx of money. There's less of a burden on doing that. You have a youth system to maybe get 1 or 2 gems every 2 or 3 years. But it's not necessarily, right, well, let's try and give 1 or 2 of these players a go because they are on the top of our team. Let's see if we can, if you get them alone or put them in a team, see how they develop and so on. I think the other problem is just if a player doesn't dazzle in their debut, they don't seem to then get the next opportunity. We've also seen the case where some players have done well. Even Johnson, when he first came through and was coming through with Moyes a bit more, he was playing well, and in the moment a fit, experienced player was available, he was dropped for that fit and experienced player. Now, if a player's playing well, arguably, why would you change your team? You would play them regardless of how, unless you got an exceptional player that's coming in, fine. But if they're not kind of performing and they have one and the player's come in and done well on his debut, give them the next game. We saw the same with Ngakia. He was playing better than Fredericks was, but Fredericks came back from an injury and Fredericks went straight in. Fredericks wasn't much better. So you kind of just go, well, you're not sending a good message to those youth players that even if you perform well, you're not going to get a chance. But if you perform badly, or if you perform okay, you're going to get even less of a chance. There's even less chance that he's going to look at you and go, you're the one that comes in. And I know it feels like we're battering Moyes. Let's be honest. Moyes has done a great job. So before people complain,
no, I think it's important to kind of
one area that I personally feel we can do better. But this is better as a club. I think our coaches need to have a bit of a stronger voice in which to arguably bash down the doors for certain players. Say no, they need to be playing. There needs to be bigger advocates, I think, in the club in which to push that. If you ever listen to West Ham under 23s and some of the commentary, they had coaches as part of that commentary team. And they were talking about, this player needs to play more. I think they even said about Alessi. He should be playing more and should be getting games, should have at least a few games in the, for the first team. Now, if that's an advocate in just a commentary where they can just be a bit more open, that advocate should be in the club in which to develop that youth and to push that youth forward. And if they fail, they fail. That's the whole thing. I think players are going to fail when they play, but fine, you move them on. I know people will then go, well, if they fail and we lose a game because of that, yes, but they're a young player. You either want to develop youth or you just want to be a buying club. If you just want to buy players and you don't want to accept that a youth player is going to make mistakes, you need to say goodbye to the likes of Declan Rice. You might as well just get rid of your youth team. So if you want to see more Declan Rices, you've got to be open to failure as well. I think that's the problem. There's such a fear that you play youth players, there's always that chance of failure.
Yeah, but I think it's important. I think it is important to say it's not about Moyes. I think it's in general in football. If say take a Vlasic, for example, or someone that signs for 30 million, if they have a bad game when they first come, you're not going to just dispose of them straight away. You'll be like, oh, we need to give him a bit more time as a fan. And it's very easy to kind of sit there as a not just a fan, but as an observer of football. If a youth player is playing and they don't play well, the immediate reaction is they're not ready. Whereas sometimes if you bring in a sign-in for a certain fee, there's almost a stigma of, well, he's just had a bad game. He needs to settle into Premier League football. And that can be players from top European clubs across Europe. It's not just players that come up from the Championship or whatever. It's some of the better players. And, these youth players, they, like you mentioned, they've only played under 23s football. So to discredit them straight away is very harsh. And it's not just a Moyes thing. It applies to the entire footballing world, and it happens a lot. But I guess one player that we did that is part of that youth setup that didn't come through the West Ham ranks is Armstrong Oko-Flex. And he was actually brought into the club, I think, last summer or maybe the season before. Last summer, yeah. So we kind of thought, in that pre-season that maybe he'd be around in the build up to the Europa League campaign, but he didn't really get that chance, and we didn't really see him much at all. So it's another one where we're looking at other players in that position, the likes of Danjuma, the likes of Lingard again mentioned. So in terms of people that haven't really seen much of Oko-Flex, how would you guys describe him in terms of what player he's most similar to in that current setup? Is he more like a Bowen? Is he more like a Benrahma or a Lanzini, Fornals? And can you see him having any realistic chance of getting into that setup at the moment, especially with the names we've been linked to?
I think he has a chance, but I don't think he has a chance at left wing. The problem is that he's played quite well at centre forward this year. Plays like a false 9. But obviously Sonny Perkins came through a bit later, and then obviously they moved Oko-Flex back to left wing. His route is probably going to be playing as a right winger and being an understudy there. But again, Dan Chester's seems to be quite liked. So his only route is to be like a third choice striker. But we also have someone else who might have that chance, but I don't think they are going to get that chance, to be honest. I would say he's probably more in the ilk of a Benrahma to a Bowen, but he can score goals. He is direct. I guess he's probably a bit of a hybrid of the two. But yeah, again, it's a player that performed really well last year. I think the problem for him was that because he couldn't be registered for Europa League, I think he would have got 1 or 2 chances in the rotation in the Europa League had he been able to be made available. But then again, I guess I say that, but then you also look at he didn't even get a game in the cup games. So
exactly, yeah.
It's kind of, we're signing a player for the youth team. And the thing that I really struggle with, and again, this is where you always then hear the argument of, well, they're not ready, that's why they're not playing. But the fact of the matter is, if you have a youth setup or you have a youth team and you have a youth player playing well, there needs to be a reward for that other than, well done, mate, you're doing well out there. Come train with the first team this week. Unless then you're going to give them a chance to come off the bench for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you're not really encouraging that player to continually improve, because they just look at it and go, I'm performing really well. We have injuries in the squad. We have maybe a player not playing very well and I play in that role. I'm on the bench. We're not winning this game. We don't look like we're going to score. I've been scoring for fun in the under-23s. Now, we all know the level is different and you're not guaranteed to score. You know, you may do a Freddie Sears score in your debut, look like you're going to score in your second game and then just tail off. But there are players that go on and score and then continue scoring. But again, you're thinking, well, I've done everything I need to do to get to this stage where I'm on the bench. But now I seem to now be hitting a wall because I'm not getting a chance to even come on for 5-10 minutes to at least have a run out there and see if I can do something on the ball. And he only has a year left. So it's much like Coventry. It's either we give him pre-season and then say, right, you're going to have a chance. But it needs to be a valid chance. It can't just be you're going to be part of our squad makeup and you will maybe get 3 or 4 games in a season. Because again, it's going to harm his development. It's actually of no real benefit to us to keep them around for that because it's just a squad filler. And I'm of the opinion if you have young players, your duty is to develop them, not to just keep them around, because I think that's just selfish and you're harming someone's young career. So if we send him out on loan, there's no point doing that unless you are giving him at least a 1-year extension, because I don't see the point of sending a player on loan for the last year unless you can extend their contract. So it almost falls into the category, like we're saying, you either keep them and you play them or you sell them. Because if they're not going to get a legitimate chance, why are you keeping them? Let the kid go off and develop somewhere else. Get as much as you can for them. Just let them go. So with Oko-Flex, he may have a chance as a centre forward if he's given a chance as a third option. I don't think he'll be second. But again, it's how many games is he going to play? He's not going to play at left wing. We're looking at left wingers. So he's not going to play over Benrahma. He's not going to play over whoever comes in. We've looked at Sarr for the right side, but how legitimate those claims are, I don't know. And again, Sarr can play on the left-hand side. So you then go, well, he's maybe got a chance as an understudy to Bowen, but again, is he going to play? Is he going to get a chance? So it's a predicament because every time I look at these youth players, I do think some of them could have an opportunity to do well. I'm struggling to see how and when they get their opportunity and how and when they get enough games in which to earn the right to be a part of the squad in a more, I guess, a more involved capacity.
It's interesting you mentioned Sarr there, because he's probably the player that he was the player I was going to kind of say he reminds me of, because he's got that sort of physicality, but with the pace, and it's almost in the way that he moves as well. It's got that similar sort of like yeah, and it's interesting because he doesn't really match the kind of players we have. He's got the kind of skillfulness of Ben Rama, but a bit more pace, and the directness of Bowen. So he is a kind of a hybrid of the two. But for me, I said it before, pace kills teams. Pace is what hurts. And for me, I didn't understand why we didn't bring him on for the last 10 minutes of games, even if like the player that I constantly look at when I think of pace is Adama Traore, because he is so inconsistent and so technically just hit or miss, but the pace kills. It gets results. It's got him a move to Barcelona from Barcelona because they realized he wasn't technically good enough, so they let him go. Yet he played more games and his pace hurt teams, and then they thought maybe we'll take a chance back on it, and it's proven again he's not very good. Yet the pace is what hurts teams, and with Oko-Flex, you've got pace, you've got a bit of trickery, and you've got a bit of finishing ability as well. So quite why we weren't throwing him on for 10 minutes just at the end of a game, I don't really get. You know, the game against Brentford, I mentioned Visser earlier. When he came on, that won them the game because they were stretching the defence and they were running at players. And where they'd been ticking down the clock time and time again, it really got to us. You could see the energy was down. But a player like Oko-Flex can just come on, if there's a loose ball at a corner, nick past someone and then find a load of space, tear into it. That's what wins you games. That's what gets you points. And whether or not Oko-Flex is good enough, personally, I would have loaned him out. But it's all about knowing what to do with players and putting them in that shop window. And Liverpool are, as much as I really don't want to admit it, they're the perfect example of this. You look at how they sold players like Brewster, who, let's be honest, he's not anywhere near a Premier League or even Championship level, but he was given minutes, and he was given minutes in different competitions, and that earned them a decent money move. Like Solanke as well. I know he came from Chelsea initially and Liverpool took him in, but they sold him to Bournemouth. And that was off the fact that he was looking good for Liverpool side who were competing, but in their reserves, in their under-23s. And then he was pushing forward and he's on the brink of the squad. That adds value. With Oko-Flex, he needs to be on that brink. And with us, we're not Liverpool. So we can afford to throw on a player. We can afford to take a chance. And he just wasn't given that chance. So I would have liked to see him given more minutes last season, sorry. But this year, I think the key thing is going to be rotating the squad properly. And I don't just mean that as in throw more names on for the sake of it. I mean, know when you've got a team tired. Look at the clock and say, you've got 10 minutes left. You know what? Chuck Oko-Flex on and run at their defenders, because that creates chances all over the pitch. And if you've got Ashby, if you've got these players who have a bit of pace, have a bit of skill, do it. there's no harm in it other than you could potentially, players make errors all the time. We've seen Ogbonna do it. We've seen Fabianski do it. We've seen all these players do it. If they make an error, it could cost you. But if you want to develop, this is what happens. Look at Steven Gerrard's slip. Like, one of the all-time most dependable players has cost you the title. And yet, it's not really a major factor in how players view development. It's not a case of like people turn on him. If you have that talent, and if you're showing the right attitude, people are going to forget it. They're going to move past it unless they're Man United fans or whatever. But it's all about giving these players chances. And unfortunately, I kind of think with Oko-Flex, I don't know if he's going to get it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, because even someone like Declan Rice, who is at this stage of his career one of the best players in his position, he made mistakes when he first came through. He wasn't, he's naturally gifted, but he wasn't someone that's not allowed to make a mistake. He did make mistakes. And I think that's one thing I liked about Pellegrini is he kept him around, and he didn't just dislodge him he didn't just dislodge him at the first mistake. He made 2, 3, 4 mistakes. He's going to do that, but that's what makes you a better player in the long term. I think with Oko-Flex, it's more difficult because there's a lot more competition in those places in terms of when you have an attacking option to bring off the bench, it's much more likely to bring on, say, a Yarmolenko or a Vlasic, and Oko-Flex probably wasn't really someone Moyes trusted to make that step, whereas someone like Ashby,
he didn't even bring on Vlasic, did he?
Exactly.
He went for, we have a very one-dimensional pace in our front line. As much as I love Fornal's not a winger. So if Fornal's on the bench, you take off Ben Rama, and he'd basically slow the pace down by bringing on Fornals to play on left wing. And he's like, we're not getting past their fullback. The answer is not necessarily to bring on a slower player, especially when you don't have a fullback who's overlapping. So you're just compounding the problem. You're adding quality still to the pitch, but you're compounding the existing problem and trying to operate from a deeper position. Now, all you're actually then doing is allowing them to set into, a deep line or a low block. You're just allowing that piece because you're dropping deeper as players. You've got more players behind the ball trying to make these interconnections and pieces. But just having a player just runs at you scares the hell out of defenders. Like it makes. They might make a mistake. This is why I don't mind Ben Rama, is that he will run at a player 4 times. And he might lose it 4 times, but there's that one time where he goes past someone and he might put it in the back of the net or set it up to someone. That to me is so much better than a player who will just doesn't commit a player and is afraid of making a mistake. I would rather have a youth player who's going to come on and go, you know what, I've lost it 4 times, but the 5th time I created a chance. Because in my mind, that's what I need you to do. I need you not to be scared. You might lose the ball, but then what I want to see from you is you running back to get it back. That's all I care about. Lose it, fine, but go and get the ball back. Because at one time when you do make that bit of skill and you get past someone, if you're making then a key pass or if you are actually making an assist, those 4 other times are irrelevant. It then just becomes a conversation as to, I need you to improve on this. You need to understand when you need to release the ball. Watch what you did to understand and use that as a development tool as opposed to you didn't do this well. It should be mistakes in football aren't mistakes. They're opportunities to learn, but being really cheesy, but it is. Every mistake is an opportunity to learn in football. And if you lose the ball, that's again an opportunity to learn. Why did you lose the ball? What did you do in that confrontation, that moment or that duel that meant you came out second best? That's what football is all about, development. A player should always get better because they are learning how to essentially make the best of their skill sets. And you don't, sometimes if you don't commit, you don't attack, or you don't at least go for a player, you're not necessarily going to find out. And if you're just kind of always playing in front of players, which we tend to have a lot of that with the way our front lot is, bar maybe Bowen.
Yeah.
it's quite easy to defend, to be honest. That's why Brighton do it so easily against us. We don't really put anything in behind them. We don't really challenge them in the flanks or really even get in behind. So we're actually quite easy to defend against. And our midfield, especially against theirs, is so high energy. We're using them as an example. All of a sudden, if you have a player that you can give the ball and get them to carry it at pace and maybe commit a player, you may draw another one out of position. All of a sudden, you start creating these pockets of space you can use.
Look at Lamptey. Look at what happened. Yeah, Lamptey came on. Look at what he does to teams. It's
pace. It scares me. And also in transition, if you nick the ball, all of a sudden you've got a player you can knock it to. Newcastle did it for us. We rated with St. Maximan. Just literally spent the whole game just twatting it over the top and just going, go on, mate, off you go and run. And that was it. That was the tactic. Hit it over the top, run. They play a high line. You'll catch them out every time.
Well, we've seen Antonio and how good he can be with that. It gives us that option to just thump it up the pitch and he'll chase it down. And especially when he picks it up on the left hand side, he'll be there. He'll win that race. He'll win that battle, and that we're going to get possession from it. And I think Bowen, like you mentioned there, is an excellent example as to what you can produce if given the opportunity. And we've seen with Bowen last season, he's missed some sitters. He's missed some absolute sitters. I think it was Leeds at home where he tried to chest it in like the 95th minute and. Towards the end against Norwich where he somehow missed. And, we don't remember those moments. We remember the excellent performances he put in, and, it got him an England call up. And even in that England game against Italy, I remember a moment where he lost the ball. He tracked back about 50 yards sprinting, tackled him, and we regained possession. So that is exactly what we need to kind of elaborate a bit more on. And like you said with Benrahma, in that Europa League game where we were losing 1-0, I think, and Benrahma scored the equaliser, and then he did a solo play to make it 2-1. That is the sort of player. That is the sort of player you can have. And I agree, Fornals out on that left isn't going to do that. He can't produce that. Lanzini can't produce that. So a player like Oko-Flex, it's going to be difficult for him, I'll be honest, next season. I really can't see him being around. I think he will be loaned out or sold. But it's going to be interesting. There's a lot of names here we've mentioned that are exciting names. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this preseason kind of turns out, because we've got a lot of games coming up and there's still more signings we need to keep bringing in. So it's going to be interesting. I think, our first games are on the 12th of July, so just over a couple of weeks now. And it's going to be interesting to see what Moyes does in terms of who he plays. We mentioned Coventry. Will he play with a Lanzini, or will he be the more attacking player in that central midfield position? Alese, another one, who's he going to be partnered with at the back? Because, the likes of Zuma, Ogbonna coming back from injury, Dawson still around. So it's going to be very interesting to see what Moyes does. I think, like we mentioned, there's a lot of talent in our youth system right now. It's just whether they're going to get that chance. And if not, we need to loan them out or move them on if they're not in our long-term plans. But it's going to be very interesting. This has been good. We've been, discussing only 4 players from the academy, and, there's so much to talk about and so much talent there, which is quite exciting because we've seen Rice come through. We've seen Johnson come through, and Gakia was another one that's just been moved on. But like you mentioned, Mike, we should be producing a lot more, and we should be developing our players a lot more, because it's very easy to go out and look elsewhere with the money involved in football. And I think that's why, particularly in the Premier League, we don't really see much youth action, especially at West Ham, because the stakes are so high and there's so much monetary value involved now in football. It can be very hard as a manager to put your trust in a player that's never played in that competition at such a high level. So I do kind of empathize with Moyes a bit. But this pre-season, if players are showing that they are good enough, I know it's hard pre-season, but if they are showing signs of talent and excitement and fans want them to be around, and it's obvious that they have that talent to progress, I think that we have enough competitions next season to give them those opportunities. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting. But I'm sure we'll be talking a lot more about the youth players throughout the summer, and as the pre-season matches get underway, and we'll be able to do some analysis on our Twitter account. So as always, going to plug that right now. Go follow us over on Babbling Irons. We are very close to 1,000 followers now, which is really good. And we're closing in on 100 subscribers as well on the YouTube channel. So if you haven't already, make sure to go subscribe to our channel, because we're going to keep the content coming, and providing you guys with some analysis of these players and all the latest rumours, transfers, that kind of stuff. So yeah, make sure to subscribe, leave a like on the video. Any last words from either of you guys?
I think the only thing I would say is think of probably all the youth players at the moment, the one who's probably got the biggest chance is Longelo, just because Cresswell's contract ends at the end of this year. And if we don't extend, if he does perform pre-season, and if we're looking at likes of Windle, we're clearly looking at a more progressive attacking fullback. He certainly is that. So should he get minutes and perform, I think he's probably the one who has the closest chance of getting a breakthrough. But again, that would depend on, say, Cresswell not having his contract extended. I think we all know what my personal opinion would be on as to whether we know or not.
I think we'll leave that now for mine. But yeah,
I think of all of it, that's probably the one that's got a chance. And we do have a good lot of youth players, but they either need a chance or they need to go on loan. And if they're not realistically going to have a genuine pathway, we just need to cut our losses and sell them, just for their own development. I think that's what we need to put first. Their development needs to be the forefront. Yeah,
sure. Sloth, anything from you?
I'm still kind of reeling from how I managed to get Stephen Gerrard into that chat about but
it's a brilliant segue, mate. It's fantastic.
Thanks. Yeah. But no, I think for this season we've just got to kind of look at it as there's so many chances for us to really integrate players in. I agree that I think Angelo is probably the one who's got that best chance on that left-hand side, particularly if we're going to move Masuaku on. But we really need to try and look to build upon what happened last season. And yeah, hopefully over the coming weeks we can add to the squad. We can get youth more comfortable. Hopefully this pre-season is going to be a chance to do that. And yeah, very much looking forward to seeing those pre-season games and the additions into the squad. So yeah, keep liking and subscribing all the videos. I'll try and put together a bit of a list of just like bargain players I think we could look at from around Europe, because they are out there, but the ever-present kind of "Are you Moyes?" question is over. I'm not aware of it. If I am, then that's kind of a new one for me. But aside from that, thank you very much for joining us.
Cheers, guys.
Yep.
Future is bright. It's not as miserable as we made it sound.
No, yeah. I think that's one point. Let's end on a good note. The future is bright. We have a lot of excitement at West Ham at the moment, and a lot to be very excited about going into next season. So, yeah, let's see how pre-season goes and the rest of the summer transfer window. And I guess there's one thing for us left to say. Come on, you irons.
Fine.